Joining me right now with more, Fairfax Global Markets CEO Paul Dietrich and author and founder of Bullseye Brief, Mr. Adam Johnson. Can you believe that? I'm like, wait a second, yes. I'm buying it from North Carolina. And they said, well, some of the parts come from China, and so they'll be made here, but you're going to have to pay a higher price. I know, and it's this whole global supply chain that, you know, it's like a web, and it's very complicated. The good news, Trish, is that even if all of the tariffs get enacted, every import from China is enacted, and every export to China is enacted, it ultimately only amounts to about 0.75% of U.S. GDP. It's not great, but we can get through it. Yeah, no, 0.75% of U.S. GDP, agreed. Not great, but I also agree we can get through it. And the danger, Paul, is if we don't deal with this, as General Jack Keane said earlier in the program, we're going to have a whole other host of problems on our hands, because the bigger China gets economically, the bigger, of course, their military can get. And we haven't bothered, Paul, to fight back, not until now.
Well, we are fighting back. I mean, let's face it. For years, we've gone to the World Trade Organization. We have filed complaints. We win the complaints in the World Trade Organization. And 20 years later, China is still stealing our technology. They are still forcing the transfer of technology, and nothing has changed. What has changed is that President Trump, let's face it, he's a bull in a china shop. He's using a caveman's club to beat our trade opponents over the head. And he's saying, look, no more World Trade Organization. You're going to stop this, and you're going to stop it right now, or there's going to be real consequences. And as General Keane mentioned, you know, the Chinese economy is going down. Ours is booming. The Chinese export twice as much to the U.S. than we export to China. This is a game of chicken, and the U.S. is driving a Mack truck, and the Chinese are driving a VW Beetle, and eventually they're going to get crushed unless they turn off and become more reasonable and stop stealing our technology, which is, in the long term, the crown jewels of the U.S. economy. I like that analogy, especially with the Beetle. So how long does this go on? I mean, is this a tit for tat that just kind of continues and continues? And hey, look, I should have found out just exactly what those tariffs would have meant on my furniture, but I don't think it was wild. It actually, if anything, I work well under deadline. It incentivized me to actually make the purchase. But I think we can handle a lot, Adam. I mean, we're doing well. So, okay, and look at it this way, Trish. Actually, the Chinese yuan has fallen about 10% since this whole thing started. So actually, if the tariffs are 10 to 25% and the yuan has already fallen 10, that means it blends it to even. But 15. Are they doing that deliberately? Are they devaluing their currency so that they actually can continue selling just as much here? They claim that they are not, and they specifically, and this is actually a good sign, Trish, they specifically said last week that they would not. Which I think the market interpreted as, you know what, for all of the angst and the pain and the hand-wringing and the bluster, we may have seen peak bluster. In other words, there are little glimpses. Mr. Trump could have said the rate's going to be 25. He made it 10. The Chinese could have said, we're going to let the yuan fall. They didn't. So there are little indications that maybe each side is just trying to figure out how to save face. They've kind of backed themselves into a corner. Both sides have. But now they sort of need to save face. Frankly, I disagree with that. I don't think we've backed ourselves into a corner. I think they're in a corner. And they got to get with the program. To the guest who said earlier, if you want to be at the big kid's table, you got to put on your big boy pants. I think that was General Keane, actually. Generals can speak like that. The general's like rivaling you on the analogies there, Paul, today. But that is really true. I mean, they actually need to play by the rules. We've played by more than the rules. We've given them so much. So it's going to change. Last thought, Paul. Well, Trish, I think it was Goldman Sachs recently, or Morgan Stanley, did a survey that even if all the tariffs that have been proposed, even the 25% tariffs, go into effect, and let's assume that there's going to be equal tariffs on the other side, it would cost the average American family about $200 to $300 a year. That's just not a lot of money. And think about it. Farmers have been hurt by these tariffs in China, but food prices have come down for most Americans. And a lot of the stuff that we buy from China, especially clothing, things like that. We can buy the same clothing without tariffs from Vietnam and Cambodia and other countries. We are just not, I mean, this thing is so overblown.
You're right.
Thank you.
You're right.
It is
overblown.
It is overblown. And by the way, China's way too cheap. China trades, by the way, at 40, its market cap is 40% of its GDP. That's where Ireland trades. It's ridiculous. China, Ireland, no. China's too cheap. We'll get through this. I'm actually buying Chinese stocks. I do like the fact that we're playing tough. It's going to work out.
And we can get more ideas, right?
I'm buying Chinese stocks, too.
Okay.
Are you? Good man.
All right. Good to see you guys. Thank
Thanks,
you so
Trish.
much. We'll be right back.